Warning, the following video contains scenes of a nerd rambling out that doesn't exist, but somehow thinks people still watch it. Enjoy. Hey YouTube, this is J101 and I am doing another Elder Scrolls lore discussion vid because the last one was entertaining for some people and they're fun as hell for me to do it. Okay, so this time on the Elder Scrolls lore discussion I'm going to be talking about the... Are you ready for this? You ready? Because I don't think many of you will be prepared for what's about to happen. Just kidding. In this episode I want to talk about the Tsaesci, which... The reason I'm talking about the Tsaesci is because not many people who are kind of into the Elder Scrolls would know much about them, and that's because they're not really associated with Tamriel. But they're still in the Elder Scrolls lore, and the whole point of this series is to focus on records in the lore that are not very well known, because I like to focus on that. Best intro ever. Anyway, basically the Tsaesci are a race from Akavir that is surrounded by much controversy in terms of their appearance and general ways of living, I guess. I'm not 100% confident about talking about this topic because I've read the lore page a couple of times and there's just so much information to cover that I'm not sure how I'm going to do, but hopefully as I get going and I do it in the structure that I've kind of prepared, I'll probably just discuss it using the structure of the lore page itself, like, you know, start with history, then anatomy, culture, and whatnot. But yeah, hopefully as I keep going, it'll just kind of roll naturally, and it shouldn't be that difficult to formulate sentences that make sense. Sensical sentences, wow. Really getting into the nitty gritty of English right here. But anyway, I'm gonna disclaim right now that everything I say in this video is a matter of interpretation, and it's purely my opinion on the topic based on what I've read. So if you are an Elder Scrolls lore freak like me and you have a different opinion on the matter or the topic, whatever you feel like calling it, feel free to make your claim in the comments, but just don't be a dick about it and say my opinion is wrong, because talking about a topic like this, there's so much controversy, it's hard to be 100% correct about everything. As I said, it's an opinion, so let's get started anyway. Now, what I'm going to explain first is that the Tsaesci were a race that lived and thrived on Akavir for thousands of years, right? They didn't do or mess with anything, and nothing really bothered them. Nobody knew about them, and they didn't really know about anyone else until late in the First Era, when the Tsaesci, for no recorded reason, invaded Tamriel. And at the time the empire in Cyrodiil was not very formidable, which also kind of forced the Cyrodiilic Empire and the Colovian Empire to kind of forge the bonds. The emperor at the time was King Riemann I, and he plays a big part in the interactions with the Tsaesci and the Tamrielic people. That's what I was going to say later on in the discussion. So anyway, the Tsaesci kind of fought all the way up to Bruma, which is like a town not too far south of the Skyrim Cyrodiil border, about around Pale Pass, that part, but I'm getting into too much geography now instead of history. So anyway, they were stopped at Bruma by King Raymond because, you know, he was a legend, and he's just like, you know what, screw you, Tsaesci, I'm gonna stop you right here. And he's cut off their power supplies until they either died out or just fled back to Akavir, and that seemingly fuck, I can't speak today, sorry. That basically ended the invasion and the battles. But instead of actually taking the Tsaesci as prisoners of war, which is what you'd probably expect, or just simply executing the remaining, he granted amnesty to most of the Tsaesci survivors and took them on in key political and military roles. Probably because the Tsaesci have very notable military prowess. They're like, their strength in a military setting is freaking amazing compared to some of the Tamriel empires and stuff. They're just they're that strong, and I'll use a very good point later on to kind of back that up, because it's just kind of amazing how they were able to. Anyway, I'll get into that later. I've got to continue on my first train of thought. So he took the Tsaesci on in key political roles, and they ultimately bred into imperial families. And because it says, I've got the lore page up as I read this as well, just so I don't forget stuff, but it says that Tsaesci surnames are considered a thing of pride among imperial nobility. So if you have a Tsaesci surname, then you're kind of a badass that everyone should worship and throw your money at. So yeah, so it says also there's still some rumored clans of Tsaesci living on Akavir. I'm not going to focus on that at all. But here is a fairly important point in my argument or discussion, which kind of shows the mindset of the Tsaesci and how they generally react to other people. So, a very important figure and person in the history of the Tsaesci is Vercedu Shea, which is a Tsaesci man, or whatever, because no one really knows what they are. Vercedu Shea was a Tsaesci potentate that Riemann put on in like a political role. Obviously, he was a potentate. He was advisor to Emperor Riemann III. So not the first one that kind of stopped them in the beginning, but 2 generations after Riemann III. And he was advising him when he tried to conquer Morrowind. Now, it's important to note that while he was advising the Emperor, he had his own ideas, and he had his own plans. He was secretly plotting to have the Emperor and all of his heirs, so that's like all of his descendants and sons and grandsons, eliminated or assassinated by they eventually got assassinated by the Morag Tong, which I haven't researched them enough to know what they are. But anyway, they basically killed the oh no, that was completely wrong. I'm sorry, what happened first was they got eliminated, like Riemann's, I can't put a sentence together. Let me just get myself together before I continue. Okay, so what happened was this. Riemann III and his descendants were eliminated under the order of Vercedu Shea, with the idea that Vercedu would ultimately take the throne and rule as the leader of Cyrodiil, which happened, and he ruled for 300 years, a rather that's a impressive amount, considering that he wasn't a true Cyrodiilic person. He was an immigrant, as some would say. And then he was assassinated by the Morag Tong, not Riemann and his ascendants. I got a little bit mixed up there. But after that, his son, which it doesn't have a name, so Versadu's son ruled for another 100 years before he was also assassinated, and then they decided to put another Imperial back on the throne because they're like, you know, they were a little bit racist. They can't have multiculturalism in Cyrodiil. That's a no-no over there, man. You can't have like a serpent person ruling your country, province, whatever you want to call them. I think they're called provinces. So that's Versadu is a prime example of how the Tsaesci really can't be trusted with others, or they can be. He might only be the only example, but they're still very ruthless and menacing in their thoughts and mindsets. So yeah, I like that about them. I like that. It's very nice. They don't take shit from no one. Now, where was I looking at here? Uriel and the Tsaesci in the third era, when Emperor Uriel Septim was emperor. Okay, the emperor was emperor. That makes so much fucking sense. Okay, so he had mostly succeeded in stabilizing his empire, all this freaking emp, all the words starting with emp are messing with my head. Okay, so he was taking back lands that they lost recently, and anyway, he tried to conquer the small island kingdoms to the east of Morrowind. So when he finally reached Akavir, so yeah, he was trying to go to Akavir, and he conquered them on the way. So he got to Akavir. He landed in the kingdom of the Tsaesci themselves, on the southeastern coast, which would probably suggest that the Tsaesci kind of have their province on the southeast of Akavir. The invasion was initially successful, but only due to the lack of the resistance from the Tsaesci. So this just, what I'm about to kind of point out, just shows again the Tsaesci's military prowess and just how formidable they are in combat. So they were initially successful for, I don't know how long, might have been, it could have been a couple of weeks, months, etc. like that, but only because there was no Tsaesci resistance actually fighting back. But once the Tsaesci armies actually decided to put up a fight, almost instantly the Empire lost to that and had to retreat. Almost instantly. Not like literally seconds after, but like a week or so after they decided to turn around and defend. It was basically a major flop, and they just had to retreat, and the Emperor himself was actually killed. Now, obviously, if you're that powerful in military situations, you're gonna be able to survive for quite a while and not be threatened by any other people who try to come to you, which is probably why Versadu wanted to take over, because he didn't take shit from no one, and he wanted to be in charge of yet another empire, to try and expand their influence. So yes, the Tsaesci were an amazing people. Very, very much so. So now we get on to the fun stuff. What exactly did they look like? Because this is where the controversy comes in. All that last part I just spoke about, all of the history and the invasions and interactions between Cyrodiil and Tamriel, just in general, and Akavir and the Tsaesci, is basically historical fact. somewhat, like to an extent, but the anatomy of the Tsaesci themselves is widely controversial. There's two theories that, or three main theories that mostly exist. The first being that the Tsaesci are a serpentine folk or people, so they're described as having the upper body of a man but the lower body of a snake, and I have images to show. So, for example, this image that I have now shows basically, if you look at the top half, you see a man wearing Akavir armor with a certain green face, and then the lower body of a snake, but with golden scales, which is another depiction of their snake-like appearance. So this is like kind of an idea of basically the idea of what they would look like, and there's another image here which shows them with that image, but in kind of a military war sort of scenario. So also the Akavir and Tsaesci people were widely influenced in design by Japanese culture, so you got the temple in the background, the samurai style armor and katanas and giant maginatas and all these weapons that samurais would have wielded and whatnot. So the kind of accuracy of this is also controversial, because there seems to be more evidence for the second theory, which is that they were actually completely human, entirely human. They look like men. So basically, if you take the image of say a Nord in Akaviri samurai style armor, that's kind of what they were as presumed to be. Or you could have a look at it from a different perspective and see that they're kind of a mix. They've got, like, for example, this image, which is apparently like a mod for Oblivion, which is the half Tsaesci race, but you can see that it's a humanoid form but with a scaly serpentine style head. So that's another way to look at it. But to kind of help with my opinion on this, I decided to go to Skyhaven Temple in Skyrim and record some footage. As it says, during one of the invasions, the Tsaesci built Skyhaven Temple. So, seeing as we have an actual Tsaesci building in Skyrim, what better way to find out a little about them than to go there and get some video footage. So I got some footage to show. The first one we're going to show is this right here. As you can see, a clear image on this pillar of like a serpentine style snake carving, and it's very you can see a lot of the architecture in here is very snake or serpent inspired, and you'll also be able to see from this scene showing right now, you got the markings on the rotating pillars that can also be depicted as being inspired by dragons or snakes, and especially this last one, the symbol of the dragonborn, could be very much depicted as a serpent or dragon drawing or carving, whatever you want to call it. There's also a shot here that I got which shows two pillars next to each other in a bit of a panning action. You can see again the snake and serpent architecture, which definitely shows their influence by serpents and where the idea or that theory came from. And also just pans up there and you can see some of the art above the doorway. Now, We also have here, what else? There's another shot here, which is the door that you go into to get into the actual temple itself. All around the head there, and the pillars. There's like more snake stuff, and if I'm just gonna roll that again so I can explain, that head is supposed to be a depiction of a Tsaesci man. So that's supposed to be what their head looks like. So that's kind of the best image we're going to get of that. But there's also another one here that aids to the theory that they were men. On Aldun's wall itself, there is a shot of men in samurai Akavir armor, like in combat with Aldun. So the assumption is that they would be Akaviri because they're the only people that wear that armor. And you can see they're completely human. They're humanoid and show no signs of being a snake or serpent whatsoever. And that's just kind of shits on the theory of them being snake people, because all of the depictions of them in this building are completely and entirely human, with only inspirations in the architecture from snakes and serpents, dragons, etc. And if we have a look at this shot of the Akavir armor, which I got Inigo to model for me, because he's like, look at him, he's a sexy cat man. The armor is entirely like human, and you could argue that I put it on a humanoid form, so it's going to shape to that. But you look at the armor itself, and it is entirely fit for a human being to wear. There's no way a snake person would be able to get their long ass windy little slithery body in that. And again, on this little shot here, we see inspiration from snake. As you can see, the belt is like snake skin with a buckle on it. So yes, there's a lot of contradictions in here, but all of these contradictions aid the final theory, which is the one I'm most favorable. I favor this theory, and I'm agreeing with the final theory the best. The final theory states that there are in fact two races that are referred to as Tsaesci. The first race is in fact entirely snake, and like not entirely snake, basically depicting as the first theory, so the upper body of a man, the lower body of a snake. But that race themselves don't actually associate or leave the province that they rule inside of Akavir. So they generally stay, and they don't kind of associate with anyone besides themselves. And the second race, which is entirely men, is the rest of the makeup of the race. So basically, prisoners of war would be inducted into the empire and trained, and they would become the soldiers for the Tsaesci that associate with the other empires in battle. So seeing as with that theory you have the snake people kind of back in the kind of giant cities, if they had cities in like the most highest like having trouble kind of picturing it and putting it into a sentence. So for example, like in the hierarchy, the highest up parts of the hierarchy would be these serpent folk, and the rest of the empire and the rest of their people would be made up of men. So whenever they go to war with other empires and other races, like the Cyrodiil-Calovian Empire in the first era, and then Uriel Septim's army in the third era, the only sign of the Tsaesci that the foreigners see is completely men, because that's what their army was made up of. So the idea is that they are entirely men. However, there's all these depictions of them being serpents and snakes, and they're definitely inspired by that, but it might not be the actual truth. And seeing as there were only the men Tsaesci people were only in Tamriel when the wars are happening, they would have been the ones who built the temple, so they have their serpent-inspired architecture, but depicting themselves as actual men, either because they are men or because they wanted to hide the fact that there is actual serpent people. One of the very inconsistent claims towards them being entirely serpents is that the Tsaesci ate all of the men on Akavir, which is why there's no more men on Akavir. But there's two kind of meanings to that, and the first meaning is that they actually physically ate all of the men on Akavir, which is extremely hard to believe, and the second one is that it's kind of a metaphor, meaning that they kind of assimilated the men into their empire, which is probably the most accurate one. So I don't really know how else to where else to go with this. This video has been not very coherent at all. Like, I really wanted to make it kind of as flowing as the last one, but I did state at the start wasn't very confident talking about this, and having the page up in front of my face kind of assisted a little bit with formulating sentences and all that, but it's kind of hard to follow. If you manage to follow it, props, because this was just a massive clusterfuck of words and sentences about something that doesn't even exist and only exists in the frail fabrics of our imagination. So I encourage you all to go and look up the Tsaesci and actually read it, read the lore page, kind of formulate your own description of them and your own opinion. You can tell me down the bottom, you might be able to change my mind and stuff, but yeah, that was at least my kind of idea and theory and opinion on the matter. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. We discussed the history, the invasions, the anatomy, the makeup of the empire. So yeah, that was me, J101, discussing the Tsaesci race from the Elder Scrolls lore. Thank you all for watching. My name has been J101, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.